Live today in the noon hour, Central Time, Texas time, Chicago, Kansas City, all of us in the Midwest. Um, Chat is live, and you know what? Today's guest is someone you're familiar with. It's my co-host often on the Live Today broadcast show. So this is your chance to talk to Sheila Walsh. So chat is open wherever you're at, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitch, and on Twitter via Periscope. You can jump in and have a conversation and ask Sheila Walsh anything you want to ask her. Now, I do have the right to screen the questions for her. But this will be fun. Sheila, how are you doing?
Doing good. And let me just say, Randy, I love that you're doing this. I've been watching some of your episodes, and it's just one of the things that sometimes can be a little frustrating is that, we don't always have the opportunity to be live, but you're here live every day, and I hope people will really get behind this. I think it's great.
Well,
As far as how I'm doing, let me just say this. I am sharing, it's just my husband and I at home because our son Christian is in grad school in Houston. So he's self-isolating with his cat. And as you may know, I'm an introvert. I love alone time and space, and I re-energize by being alone. Barry, on the other hand, is an extrovert. He re-energizes by being with people and talking. Well, now there's just me to talk to. So that's been interesting.
I've seen that. People that are like Barry, because I'm more like you, I can be alone, and this social distancing thing is wonderful if you ask me. Nobody's invading my personal space, and I'm good with that. But for the people that really feed off the interaction, it is a little difficult for them.
Yeah, and I mean, Barry has this ability to have several streams of consciousness going at the same time, whereas I'm with one. So the other night, I'm watching the Great British Baking Show on Netflix, and all I'm concerned about is will Sophie's souffle rise? At the same time, Barry's reading me an article talking about whether a hamster can give COVID-19 to a cat. I can't worry about both those things at the same time. I'm sorry.
And I know which one you're actually more interested in, I'm sure. So, okay,
Correct.
well, so you mentioned your son. Your son was one year ahead of my son at Texas A&M, and so Christian's now in grad school. I didn't know that. That's great, by the way. And now my son, we were supposed to be going to graduation next week, and
Oh,
he's not walking. But you know what? The funny thing is, he's like me, and my wife's like, "Oh, you don't. Did you order your cap and gown yet?" He's like, "No, I didn't order that." And I'm like, "Are you disappointed that you're not?" He goes, "I hate graduation ceremonies, Dad." And I'm like,
really?
"That's my boy." So he's like, "Let's just be done with this and move on with my life and get married later this summer." So
What about Ring Day? Did he get to do Ring Day?
we did actually do that. We went down
Oh,
for that,
that's good.
and he won out of his whole group, if you know what I mean. So.
I know what you mean.
uh, but you told me before we started that you had an interesting conversation with your son, and I think it's relative to a lot of people out there right now. So tell us the
Yeah.
questions Christian has and the way you handled that.
I'm so grateful for like FaceTime Live. I mean, at least because, just calling somebody and hearing their voice, to me, it's not the same as being able to look them in the eyes
Mm.
and actually say, okay, how are you doing? I don't understand. God is good, that God is love, and also that God is sovereign. He's powerful. But I watch, one of his friends, her parents are both really, really sick with COVID-19. And he said, they've been praying for their parents, and it seems like they're getting worse. So it was the thing that you and I we've all struggled with these questions. A good God and suffering, when God could intervene, but appears not to be. It's just, and honestly, I said to him, honestly, Christian, these are really important questions. If you want a real faith, you have to struggle with these real questions because he wants to be a counselor.
Mm.
And I said, someday somebody's going to sit in front of you and say, tell me why I should believe in God when my child just died.
Yeah, yeah, those are tough. We're having to face a lot of those. You have been talking to people online, but you had to cancel some events. What are your plans for those people that were maybe looking forward to seeing you live and in person? Do you know what you're planning on doing?
At the moment, they're moving events to the fall. The ones that I had in March, the people kind of hoped to be able to move them to May. We had events in Branson and Pigeon Forge, but they just said, "I'm sorry, we can't have. Obviously, you can't have 7,000 women in a building at this time." So, at the moment, things have been moved to the fall. But as you know, it's an ever-changing landscape. We don't really know. I mean,
Yeah.
here in Dallas today. I don't know if it's all of Texas, but they've begun a kind of partial reopening. Some of the malls and stores and restaurants at 25% capacity. But I mean, I'm not going to go anywhere this weekend. I
Yeah.
just, because I want to see, well, how does that impact the statistics?
Yeah.
Because we had a higher death count yesterday. So it's just, nobody seems to know what or even if there is a right thing to do.
Yeah, that's true. And I don't know that I'm willing to be your guinea pig either, because as much as I miss Taco Tuesday, I do. I'm looking at it going, I'm not quite ready to hit the tight public places yet. So we'll see. One thing you are doing, though, that I want people to know about, and it's available on your website, SheilaWalsh.com, and that starts, is it today or tomorrow, your 31-day prayer journey?
It starts today. It's
Starts
called Pray Through to Breakthrough, all 31 days of May.
Okay, so people need to jump on SheilaWalsh.com. They can do it while they're watching this interview and join. Just sign up, right? And what do they get when they do that?
Well, we're going to have, first of all, I've written out a prayer. And then every single day, there's going to be journal pages they download and just highlighting different areas like depression, anxiety, all different things, and asking people, ask the Holy Spirit to show you where you are struggling. And there's going to be like 31 different areas you could struggle in. But if you struggle, say one or two of them are the main ones, you can stick with those every day. And I'm going to hop on Facebook Live every week, every Sunday, and just kind of try and give a hopeful start to the beginning of the week. I wanted to do something that would be completely free to people because, let's face it, a lot of people are wondering how they're going to pay their bills. So I wanted something that they could download that would be free and that we could kind of take this journey together. And the other good thing is from yesterday, I think, until May the 8th, you can get my new book, Praying Women, the e-version on any place like Kindle or Nook. They've made it available for $1.99. So I was very grateful to them for doing that because most of us can manage to find 8 quarters, stuffed in the cushion somewhere or in the car. So it makes the book more doable.
Yeah, no, and actually, I know most of those guys have a minimum, so I don't even know that you could make it cheaper if you wanted to, but obviously $1.99 is very doable, so I encourage people to do that. Again, that website, which has the link to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and is that iBooks?
Yes.
Is on SheilaWalsh.com, and then obviously you can sign up for the Pray Through to Breakthrough 31-day prayer journey. No reason you shouldn't do that. I mean, it's ready. Oh, and is that Barry over there putting the links in the Facebook chat?
Oh, I bet he is. He's upstairs with the dogs. And I said, so the last time I did a Facebook Live, he jumped on and started talking to people. I'm like, you can't do that. But
Good.
I bet he's upstairs doing that right now.
No, I actually appreciate it. I'm going to repost it for the people that are not on Facebook. But it does say Sheila Walsh is commenting, and I can tell you're not. So that is too
Wee
funny.
monkey.
Hi, Barry. How are you doing? Posting as Sheila. I see you out there. This is the joy of live.
I know, yeah.
Okay, so I want to ask you something, and you talk about talking to your son, Christian, about the big question of suffering, and you're talking about the anxiety and all those sorts of things. Someone brought this up, just things.
It's a great question. And honestly, yes, it has. I mean, I was diagnosed back in 1992 with severe clinical depression, and I've been on medication ever since. And initially, that was it felt like a shame-filled moment because I felt, as a believer, I should be able to get through this without medication. But my doctor helped me understand that, because I remember saying to him on my first day I met with a psychiatrist, I spent a month in a psychiatric hospital. And on the first morning I met with my psychiatrist and he talked about medication. And I said, I don't want any of your happy pills. And he said, no, those are street drugs. We don't do those. And he explained that what I would be prescribed with is something that will simply up the level of chemicals in my brain that I don't produce enough serotonin. And so, literally, what it does is it makes it possible for you to function as the person God has created you to be. And so, I still take my pill with a prayer of thanksgiving every morning. But for the first 2 or 3 weeks of this virus, of this lockdown, because we're coming to the end of, I think, week 5 here in Texas, I would get up in the morning, but I didn't even get dressed. I would stay in my pajamas all day, and I would kind of binge watch Netflix. I mean, there's like 9 seasons of the Great British Baking Show. I think I've seen them all. But I found myself really getting down, and it wasn't just, I mean, there's some people who struggle with depression, and it's situational, particularly the moment you look at, when can I work again? How can I
Mhm.
pay my bills? Can my child go to college? What's going to happen? That's natural and hard to deal with. But if you have a diagnosis of depression or anxiety added onto that, you have to be really vigilant. And so I began to ask the Holy Spirit, how can I live in these days? Because I discovered there's something very healing for me about going out every weekend and speaking and being with women and talking to them and teaching from the Word of God. That I found that really it builds me up as well. So I began doing something like 2 3 weeks ago, and I do it every day now, and it's really helped me. First thing in the morning, I get up and I go outside to our little backyard, and I simply raise my hands up to the sky. And it's not, honestly, Randy, even as an act of worship, it's an act of complete vulnerability and dependence.
Mm.
Because I have this picture of Christian when he used to travel with us when he was just a wee boy. And, he would march through the airport with his little Thomas the Tank Engine backpack on. But every now and again, he'd get tired and he would just reach his arms up. He didn't have to say a word. I knew. And I would reach down, pick him up, and hold him close.
Mm.
And that's what I'm doing every day now. I go outside and I reach my arms up, and just knowing that my Father picks me up and holds me close. And I do it 2 or 3 times a day. I mean, I'm sure our neighbors think I've lost my marbles. But I also, the other thing I do is I take my Bible and I read a psalm out loud every single day. In fact, Barry started joining me on our little balcony,
Mm.
and I'll read a psalm out loud, because there's something about letting your ears hear what your eyes are reading. And it's like David when he used to say, "Bless the Lord, oh my soul." He was talking to himself. He was like, "Come on, soul. I know this looks bleak and hopeless, but we're going to bless the Lord because God is still good. He's still on the throne." And that is really, really helping me.
That is great. I think that's wonderful, and I think it's wonderful recommendation for anybody that may be struggling with this for whatever reason. My twisted mind wonders, does your balcony face a private area or is it a public area?
It's a public
Is
area.
it?
But you know what I've wondered? Because we live in just a little townhouse. It's 3 levels, and the balcony is in the kind of middle level. And I know our neighbors either side. And I'm even find myself, I don't yell the psalm out loud. I just read it out loud. And I'm just even wondering, Lord, is there any way that your living word could just float across a couple of balconies and maybe touch people that I don't even know about?
Well, if you announce a particular time, I'm sure we can get a crowd that would gather below you to hear you read.
And then I would get arrested. So there you go.
Yeah, in Dallas, you might. Um, okay, so here's the thing. And one, thank you for helping me, someone who does not struggle with any type of depression, understand it. Because what I've come
Thanks.
to realize is, I'll tell you this: when I grew up, my glasses were as thick as Coke bottles. That was the joke, that I had the Coke bottle glasses because they were so thick. And when my parents realized that, okay, we can still pray for God to heal people, and they were praying for all these people, and people that know my, James and Mary Robinson, they know the story. I prayed. They prayed for me. All the biggest faith leaders prayed for me. Guess what? My eyes kept getting worse. Was it because I had a lack of faith? Jesus only says I need the faith of a mustard seed. That's not that big. And do I believe God can heal? 100%. Did I ask Him to heal me? Absolutely 100%. I wore contacts until my retinas detached in my 30s for no particular reason. I wasn't out boxing. And so I had to go to surgeons twice. I've had 2 major surgeries to reattach my retinas. Then I got cataracts. get more surgeries. Now I have lenses implanted in my eyes. I have to use eye drops every day. Is it because I have a lack of faith, or because God doesn't heal, or because I'm deficient? I mean, yes, in a way I'm deficient because I can't see as well as the average person. But there's no shame in that. No one has ever really looked at me and said, I think maybe you just have a spiritual thing going on. It's like, no, I live in a fallen world and things are imperfect. And once I realized that, the physiological part of depression is much the same thing. One, I quit judging people or wondering about people, which would be my tendency because I try not to judge. But wondering, really, can you just get over this? And for you to come out and boldly address the issue, I think takes a lot of shame off of a lot of people, removes a lot of questions out of a lot of people's minds, gives them hope that, you can, like for me, my vision will never be as good as most people's. I'm always going to struggle in that area, but I can go to doctors. I can do the eye drops or any medication that I might need. Fortunately, I don't need a lot right now. But it's okay. God still loves me. God still uses me. I'm no less in God's eyes because I'm human. So thank you for that. And thank you for addressing it. Let's see. Someone asked, what is in the book of Psalms? What is it in particular that the Psalms does for you?
Okay, that's a great question. I believe that God gave the Psalms to the people of God to pray back to God. And whatever you are feeling, in fact, Athanasius, way back, in the 3rd, 4th century, wrote that Psalms are like the gymnasium for the soul. And whatever you're feeling, you'll find yourself in the Psalms. I mean, if you're struggling, like Psalm 34, for example, David wrote that at one of the worst times in his life. He was running from King Saul. He did some terrible things that cost the life of a lot of good, godly people. And then he goes to this place where it's a foreign king, and he pretends to be insane. You have the anointed king of Israel drooling on himself and scraping at the walls. And the king throws him out. So David is alone. Some ragtag and bobtail people will join him in a bit, but he's alone at this moment. And he writes Psalm 34. And in it, he says, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. He also says within that psalm, those who look to him for help will be radiant with joy. No shadow of shame will touch their faces. And what I think is interesting is right in the middle of the Psalms, you find Psalm 88, and it's kind of an anathema. Some of the Psalms that deal with hard things, they'll begin with, Lord, how long is this going to go on? When are you going to do something? But they resolve toward the end, but yet I will hope in God. Psalm 88 does not resolve. It begins with pain and questioning, and it ends that way. And I think that's a gracious gift from God to help us understand there's moments when you literally all you can do is lament. We're so used to in the church, we just want things that are happy, things that are quick fixes, things that will make us feel better. I believe that this is a time for us as the church to lament, to believe in the goodness of God, to believe in the power and the authority and the love of God. But Scripture says, weep with those who weep. And I think if we just come across as little happy chappies at the moment, we're totally missing the point. So start with Psalm 1. If that doesn't hit you where you're at the moment, keep going till you find a psalm. If you're afraid, start with Psalm 27. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? You will find yourself in the Psalms.
An interesting thing about the Psalms that you touched on is that a lot of what David does is he pours out his frustration, his confusion, he's kind of complaining, frankly, in some places to God. And then in several of them, you'll see him turn in the middle of it. And it's almost like he pours out his problems to God, and then he verbalizes or writes God's response to him. And this sort of two-way thing going on, I think, is a great example for whatever situation you're in. And like you pointed out, whatever you're feeling, it's in the Psalms, because David went through the range of situations and emotions. And it's okay to follow David's example and pour out our questions, our frustrations, the I don't understands, the whys to God, as long as we then turn around and listen to see what he's saying back to us.
Yeah, I think that David modeled for us what Christ ultimately modeled for us in the Garden of Gethsemane, which is you pour out your pain and your questions and your no, Lord, please. But to the level we're willing to be honest with God is an indication of the depth to which we actually trust him. If we think we have to be careful with God, our picture's too small. And what I've discovered is when you pour out what's inside, you make space for grace. That's what David did. He would pour out his questions and his fear, and he'd literally open himself up then to receive the grace and the mercy and the truth that he knew as deep as the marrow in his bones.
Let me ask you about, it ties into that, your Pray Through to Breakthrough that's available right now that people can start today for a 31-day prayer journey with you. What role did prayer have to take place in your life to give you the kind of breakthroughs were you looking for? And what were those breakthroughs? In other words, what has prayer done for you personally that you're sharing with others?
That's a great question, Randy. And honestly, the reason I started, I never intended the book to be a published book. I started it simply as a journal for myself because I felt that prayer was my weakest area. I love Bible study, I love teaching, I love all of that stuff. But I felt like prayer was the area where I was weakest. And so one of my dearest mentors, Ruth Graham, Billy's wife, before she went home to be with the Lord, some nights when he was on crusades, I would go to the house and stay with Ruth. And she said to me, Sheila, when you're researching a subject, don't just read all the current writings. Go as far back as you can. And so I would go way back into church history and read what people wrote about prayer. But the more I wrote about it, and then I decided one night just to throw the question out on Facebook. And I said, okay, this is a question I'm asking for myself, but I wanted your input. When I say prayer to you, what comes to mind? And I said, now don't say the right thing. Don't say what you think you're supposed to say. Say what you're really feeling. And some of it was predictable at first. I get distracted. I'm halfway through praying. I'm thinking, did I defrost the chicken? Or I feel like I just keep repeating myself over and over. But some had more weight. Things like, I prayed for my marriage, but my husband still left. So why pray? Or if God already knows what he's going to do, why bother praying? So I began to see this as an area that many of us struggle in. And it brought me back to the greatest breakthrough I could remember in my own prayer life. And that was, at 19, I went to seminary in London. I worked with the BBC in the United Kingdom. I worked with Billy Graham and his crusades. Then for 5 years, I co-hosted the 700 Club with Pat Robertson. But then, one day in 1992, as I said, my life fell apart and I ended up in a psych hospital. And that night, the only prayer that I could, and I mean, it came out almost like a guttural prayer with tears pouring down my face, was just 2 words: help me. And to me, it was a prayer of defeat. But I have to tell you, I have never felt the presence of Christ more palpably than that. And that God is not looking for perfect.
So do it on an app. Get the Light Source app, and you can find Life Today broadcast and Life Today Live. So these live ones are also on the Light Source app. You can get that in the Play Store and the Apple, whatever they call their app downloading area. I'm not an Apple guy, so I don't know. Last thing, Sheila. Last thing that I want to ask you about is something that I know is big to you and me both, because we've both been in the mission field. And did you have to cancel a trip? I think they just canceled one.
Still don't know. We were supposed to be going to Angola in June, but it's not looking good.
No, I don't think so. Even though there's far fewer cases in Angola than there are in Dallas County. You'd probably be safer there, but I think the getting there is the hard part.
It's going through London and all that stuff.
Yeah, the flights. My wife won't let me fly right now either. I wanted to soon, but she's like, you're not getting on an airplane. Anyway, so in Angola and other places,— you've seen the hunger, the pain. it's really hard to go into a clinic. I know the first day I was there, when I was there almost 2 years ago now, three babies died in one day. That's real hard to look at. How do you, especially someone who, honestly, someone who's dealt with depression, how does that not just send you off the edge?
That's, it's interesting because I remember my first day in a malnutrition clinic, and I had never seen anything like it in my life. In fact, I sat beside a little one that I thought was maybe 2, 3 months old, and discovered that she was 3. And
They
she
don't
was
look
so,
at, yeah,
severely, and her hair had gone red, and I realized that's from lack of protein in their diets.
right.
But I remember going back to our tent. We were living in tents, and laying down and sobbing.
Mm.
And honestly, I've never heard the audible voice of God. I felt as if the Lord said, Sheila, get up and dry your face and go home and tell people we can change this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. My reaction, honestly, after my first trip years ago, was when I came home, was anger, because then I go and I go to a restaurant and I hear somebody complaining about their food, or I go to Starbucks and I hear somebody upset that their coffee's not hot enough or something, and I'm like, there is such a disconnect between the West and our expectations, and the suffering that you see in these other places, and for me, God was like, don't be angry where there's bounty. That's the way it should be. And don't be angry because people are suffering. Do what I've called you to do, which is to alleviate the suffering. And so that's why that's why I came back to Life Outreach in 2002, was because of the outreaches that we do. I want to show people some things, and they're going to get to see you. And I think this is in Angola. You weren't on the trip to the South Sudan earlier this year?
No, I wasn't on that one.
I don't want to be on that one. That's a rough trip. But you're going to see, I want to show some people some things that are going on right now. And then you'll get to see Sheila from the last trip to Angola that she was on. Because while people are suffering, and I fully acknowledge that there are people with all sorts of difficulties right now, financial questions. I have friends who literally lost parents to the coronavirus. I understand there is suffering. In the midst of our pain and our suffering, let's not forget others who suffer tremendously all the time, not just during a crisis, but all the time. We can change what's going on. It's been wonderful to see here how people have rallied to help their neighbors. It's the way it should be. And I'm encouraged by that. But we have others that may be a little further away, but they're still people that God has put in front of us and people that we need to reach out to. So take a second and watch this, and then Sheila and I will come back to you in just a minute.
The birth of a child is one of the most transcendent moments in time. The miracle of life. Tiny hands and feet, we instinctively see they're created in the image of God. And over time, they grow into the young men and women they were designed to be. At least, that's every parent's hope and prayer.
I don't know if you can, oh, darling, I don't want to touch it. I don't want to hurt you, but can you see her skin? Her skin has begun to literally peel off her body.
Throughout Africa, terrible events like famine and drought have decimated entire communities and left many with little or no food. The devastating effects of severe food shortages are most visible in the children.
With severe malnutrition, the first organ to shut down is the skin. It's as if all the reserves go to try and protect what's left inside. James and Betty, you have sat here over and over and over through the years, faithfully serving and feeding millions. But I know you'll see this. This mom, who is desperate like any mom would be to save the life of her precious child, had to travel 30 kilometers to get here. But it's why mission feeding matters so much. We talk about life, where it's needed most. Where it's needed most is in the villages where these darling children live. Because this mum shouldn't have to travel 30 kilometers with a desperately sick little lamb. They need our help, and they need it now.
And Sheila, you know, as painful as it is to see those children in those conditions, as we saw you there in that malnutrition clinic in Angola, as hard as that is to see, it is encouraging when we know we have the solution. And as we saw the trucks bringing the bags of food in, and then you and others distributing the bowls of soup, those bright orange bowls that our viewers provided those as well. It's encouraging to know that we can be a part of that solution. Is that, I know it is for me, is that one of the things that carries you through on one of those trips, knowing that we can be a solution?
Absolutely, that is it. And I'll never forget something your mom said. She said that her prayer was that the line would never be longer than the food that we had.
Yeah.
And so at the moment, it almost seems to me like we've got a kind of choice how we live. We can kind of hibernate till this is over, or we can learn to radiate the love of God, even in the worst of circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And I would really encourage our viewers, don't see this as a time when, well, we'll think about that later. Because literally children are dying every day, and our partners on the ground. It's one of the things I love about your dad. You know, he doesn't just kind of burst into a country and say, here I am, James Robertson, to save the situation. No, he doesn't do that. He looks to say, Lord, who are you using in this country?
Yeah.
And then he underwrites what they're doing. And we've told our partners, we will not desert you. And so now we just need to step up and stay true to that.
Yep, and people go to lifetoday.org/live. That is a designated place for our online viewers to support the mission feeding. And actually, they can get a free book of mine there if you want it as well. So we'd like to give back. And we have lots of those in stock, just to be bluntly
honest. And it's a really,
honest.
really good book. It's a good book.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. But to me, you know, honestly, when I came back, I grew up, just a little moment of transparency here. I grew up with a televangelist. And I went to public school where televangelist was not an endearing term. And so I promised myself that I would never be like that. Not that I would not share the gospel on TV, but I would never be the stereotype of, frankly, always asking for money on television. How are you with the televangelist stereotype of always asking for money on television, Sheila?
I try not to think about them at all.
Perfect. Gracious answer. You're nicer than me. But here's the thing, and I get, I mean, it's because they're buying airtime. They have to, you're not on the air if you don't get money out of your viewers. It's like public broadcasting, except they do telethons, which sound nicer than some of the televangelists. But here's the deal. Here's the bottom line. With my resistance to that sort of thing and swearing I would never be that guy, when I was over there the first time, it was Mozambique actually, God convicted me of my pride. And he said, you know what? If I want you to ask so that you can help these children, that's what I put you here to do. And you better get over it, buddy. So I don't care what people say about me, because I'm asking people to help save the lives of children. And when we look at suffering, we ask those big questions. How can God be good and allow people to suffer? You know what? I think God's going, how can I put you next door or not that far, or watching something on television and seeing the need and you not do something? God's put us here to be the answer to their prayers. So when they ask God for help, I think God looks at his people and says, there's help. Can we tell them help is coming? Help is on the way. We have the people in place to do it. We have the factories. We've been there a long time. And it's not always the same place. It moves from crisis situation to crisis situation. So we have seen wonderful results. We know this works. But we do need your help, because we can't do it by ourselves. And so if God has put it on your heart, go to lifetoday.org/live, and you can make a difference in someone's life today. Sheila, what's your response to people when they do give, when they do join with us in mission feeding outreach?
Oh, I mean, I don't even have the words adequately to thank you for the way that you have underwritten this ministry for so many years. And sometimes I find myself wishing I could take you with me, that we could just get on the plane together and I could show you the difference, because in 2 days, I could show you. I could take you on day one to the malnutrition clinic, and it would literally break your heart.
Mm-hmm.
You would think, this is hopeless. But on day two, I could take you to one of the villages where we've already set up a feeding program.
Yeah.
And I have the privilege of sitting there. And before I hand it out, because it looks a bit like oatmeal, I thought, well, I'm going to taste this before I hand it out to all these children.
No.
And it's actually, I ate it. It was actually pretty good. But then to be able to and these children, they line up and they're like children should be. They're happy and they're talking.
Yeah.
And the malnutrition clinic, there's no laughter.
Mm-hmm.
They use their last bit of energy just to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
Contrast between those two places is life and death.
That's it.
And so little changes so much.
Yep. And the difference between that life and that death is you. So please do join us with that. Thank you guys for being with us. And don't forget Sheila's prayer journey. I want you guys to do that. That's free. Prayer is free. God's blessings are free, and they're worth way more than money can buy. So get into the free stuff, right? And then give. Sheila, thanks for being with us today. Appreciate all that you're doing, even in your quarantine. And the word gets out in Dallas, you might have a crowd. So you keep reading those Psalms on your balcony, and we'll see what happens.
Thanks, Randy. It's nice to see your face.
And thank all of you for being here on Life Today Live. I am booked solid for the next 2 weeks with guests, really good guests. So get out there, share this wherever you're watching it. If you haven't subscribed or followed to the channel, depending on where you're watching, subscribe or follow or like, do all those things so you get the notifications. And we'll be back just to encourage you, to challenge you, to bless you, and continue to just be a part of your life. So thank you guys for being with us. We will see you next time on Life Today Live. I forgot to cue up my music today, so this is the stretch part. Come on, music. Sean, play me some music so we can say goodbye on Life Today Live. It's slow. Thank you guys for being with us.